What's up, y'all? It's Kaylee, your host of Clearly Focused, back with another episode for you guys today. And this one is going to be all about questionnaires. Now, I know that a lot of us want to up-level our client experience, and the first thing that we think of usually is client gifts or questionnaires. Basically, how can we relate more to the client and how can we get more inside their head, that kind of stuff. Now, these are not the only ways to improve your client experience, but they are some of the best and the easiest ways. Questionnaires are a really great tool to keep in your tool belt, and a lot of times people just don't know what to be asking on these questions or what not to ask on these questions. Now, if you've ever been on the receiving end of a service-based provider, then sometimes you know what it's like to kind of go, let's just say like a hairstylist, for example. If you go into this appointment, they're going to ask you tons of questions about what you want to do with your hair, what are you thinking, cut color-wise, show me your inspiration pictures, all that good stuff. That's kind of what we want to do here. We want to make sure our clients are being taken care of, and that they feel seen and that their visions are being acknowledged as well. So before we get into the nitty gritty, I want to take the 30 seconds of silence. And for this part, I just want you to put yourself in the client's shoes. If you were booking a session with a photographer, maybe you've never done that before or very few times, or maybe you have done it before, and think about what kinds of things that you would want to see. How would you want to feel with your photographer? What kinds of questions would you want them to ask to feel seen and to feel acknowledged? And just get into that mindset on the other end rather than being the photographer and being the one asking the questions, but be on the receiving end for that. And then we will get into it. All right, y'all. So like I was saying earlier, questionnaires are great to include in your workflow, and you can include really as many as you want. You want to make sure to not bombard them with just like questionnaire after questionnaire after questionnaire, but it is nice to send them just every so often, especially if this is a wedding client, because you can be checking in with them about different things periodically throughout the whole time of your relationship with them. And it's just a good way to remind them that you're there and you're thinking about them. It's not just like, hey, sign the contract and I'm not going to talk to you until it's time to plan your timeline. So questionnaires are something useful and something that you should be applying in your business, but however feels most natural to you. If you want to include like one big questionnaire or split them up into a couple different questionnaires, and it honestly does kind of depend on what kind of, if this is for a wedding, is this for a session, is this for branding, because you are going to need different questions to ask for different types of sessions. So if you're like me and you shoot all the things, you could have multiple questionnaires. You could have a branding questionnaire to send them before their branding session. You could send them a family questionnaire and get to know their family and that kind of stuff. This is not something that I do. I have considered it though, to be honest, because getting to know families as like, what do they like to do together? How can give me a little overview of each kid so that I can get to know their personalities, their favorite snacks, their favorite songs, that kind of stuff. And then you can show up a little bit more prepared, bring their favorite snacks, have their songs downloaded on their phone or their shows or something like that to capture their attention when you kind of start to lose them. And then even with branding, it'd be nice to know their brand voice, their brand colors, what kinds of props they plan on including, any inspiration pictures that they're having, just kind of the overall vibe of their brand, so that way you can help them when you're shooting to bring their brand to life instead of shooting something that's inauthentic to their brand. You don't want to be making them do super fun, cute, bubbly things if they're a very professional, minimalist type brand, right? So just being able to get yourself in line with that too is very helpful. So this is something that you could do and just kind of split them up based on each type of session that you shoot. If you are like me and you shoot a ton, that's really helpful. But if you just shoot families, then obviously you would only need the family questionnaire, like a pre-session questionnaire, just to kind of get to know their expectations. So this one specifically is going to be mostly geared towards weddings, but you can also apply this to other sessions and kind of take some of the questions that I ask and change them around for whatever it is you shoot, whether it's seniors, like what kind of sports do you play, or hobbies do you have, what are your favorite colors, what kinds of clothes do you like to wear, how would you describe your style, that kind of stuff. They're always good to have, and just mix it up to be whatever feels best for you. But the first, I think, it's technically not really a questionnaire, but the first thing that I have my clients fill out obviously is that inquiry form. So I already know a little bit about them from their inquiry form. And if you remember in episode 62, I did a refresher of your inquiry form and email response. So go check that out and kind of update that first, because that's, in all honesty, the first kind of questionnaire that they're coming to receive from you is on your website. So you can ask them questions about how they met, or favorite hobbies they have, what kind of book. For me, I ask them what kind of book they're reading right now because I'm a book nerd and I like to relate to them on that. So having questions like that already in their inquiry response is probably the most important thing, because you can get to know them right off the bat and use that in your inquiry response to be able to respond to them personally instead of just having a more generic one. You can be like, oh, I read that book once, or like, oh, I have an Australian Shepherd too, or like, hey, we've hiked that trail and I love that place, you know, whatever. Or if they travel and they're travel bugs, like you can talk about where you've traveled, favorite vacation, that kind of stuff. You have those right off the bat that you can respond to within that inquiry response email. And that's just like, again, it's not really a questionnaire, but it's increasing that client experience that you want them to feel seen as more than just someone who's paying your bills. Okay, so the first questionnaire, like legit questionnaire that I actually send them, is a couple's intro form is what I call it, because they're just like introducing themselves to me as a couple. And so I just kind of wanted to get to know them, and I typically send this out like about a month before we do the engagement photos. So I also send this to couples who are just doing engagement sessions with me, not just wedding couples, but even wedding couples who don't do an engagement session with me, like say they're traveling into Nashville and they aren't doing an engagement session with me. I still send them this couples questionnaire because I want to get to know them as a couple, and it feels good to me to show up and have these answers kind of in the back of my head. And I don't feel like we're strangers, you know? I also love giving them an opportunity to have a little date night, you know, to get together, just the two of them, and sit down and, you know, enjoy the season of being engaged. It's super fun. And you could even kind of send these to couples who aren't engaged, just like maybe they're dating or maybe it's an anniversary. You can either just tell them like, hey, there's questions on there that are like, what are you looking forward to about your wedding day? And if they're not engaged or they have already been married, then you can just say like, answer to the best of your ability, or, you know, skip those, or however you want to do it, or like put yourself back in those shoes. However, that's kind of what I do for anniversary sessions, because there's only like 2 questions that are specifically about like your wedding day, really. The rest of them are just about like their relationship and who they are as people. So being able to tailor it a little bit to just dating couples versus anniversary couples versus engaged couples is really nice. So you want to, on these questionnaires, ask questions that will help you get to know them more as people and like not and as a couple, but also you want to know their expectations and their expectations of working with you. So make sure to include questions about how they met, like, you know, who asked who out on the first date, who proposed, and how they like to spend time together, maybe favorite memories that they have together. Those are really important things to get to know them as a couple and get to know them as just like human beings, right? Something that maybe you can relate to them on. But also you can incorporate these into their photos, because if they say, hey, like our first date was at Taco Bell, then you could just be like, yo, let's go to Taco Bell at the end of your session and just like take a few photos of you guys eating some burritos or whatever. You know what I mean? And you would have never had that idea if you had not had that questionnaire that they answered that said, this is what we did on our first date, or this is something that we always do together, right? So having things like that is always really nice, but also including questionnaires about what kinds of images they like, if they like more posed or more candid shots. This is typically for people who are like me, and I'm kind of hybrid. I do some candid in motion prompts, but I also do some poses like stand here, arm here, smile here, just to get like, we want to get a few of those good smiling ones that they'll want later on down the road and their parents will want now and all that kind of stuff. But asking if they want to do any trendy photos like blurry motion, that kind of stuff, those are always fun, just because sometimes the couples just aren't into it. And even if like it's something that you really love to do, it's not about you, it's about the client. So you want to make sure that their experience is true to form and feels authentic to them, instead of feeling really forced and leaving them feeling awkward, being like, we did this crazy run around, hold hands, spinning thing, and she was just doing this blurry thing with her camera, and like, I'm not gonna like any of those photos, and like, I told her I don't like blurry photos, and she did it anyways, then like, it's difficult. So don't, even though it's like hard not to do it, because if it's something that you really love to do, I just want to make sure that you're helping your client feel as comfortable as possible, and that they leave the situation, or they leave the session feeling really well seen, really well taken care of, with no bad reviews, no hard words or anything. I love including questions that will help me know how to care for them better if something happens or if there's any issues. Including questions like that shows that you care more about them than a client, like care more about them than just a client. And if you want to be prepared for how best to help them if a situation like that arises, you want to make them feel comfortable. So just being able to ask questions like that is going to be good for any kind of sticky situation. You're like, oh, I know what they need from me here. And just being able to be really intentional with your couples and make sure your energy matches throughout the whole time you're working with them is just, it's very important, and it makes everyone feel I just feel more connected, more seen. There's no like awkwardness throughout the whole process, which is nothing anybody wants. So that is kind of a couples questionnaire that I send, like I said, about a month before the session, just to get to know them a little bit. And the next one I send, and this is for weddings specifically, it is just a pre-wedding questionnaire, wedding prep questionnaire. And I send that about 3 months before the wedding. And this is just like all the nitty gritty details. It's probably the most lengthy one that I have, just because it's not like it takes the longest, because some of them are just yes, no questions. But it's all about like where I should arrive first, if the couple is getting ready at different locations, what time the ceremony is going to be, and then even just like certain events, like what events are happening during the day, first look, bouquet garter toss, an exit, any kind of ceremony traditions like a ring warming or a candle lighting or something like that. It just helps you. You basically want to ask any question that you're going to need to work on the timeline for them. From the beginning of the day to the end of the day, you want to know what's happening, where do you need to be, what moments are important to capture, all that kind of stuff. So having a questionnaire that, and you can add to it as you go. Like if you're new in the wedding industry and you're like, oh, I didn't think about asking this question, but now I wish I had, then you can always go back and add it. And that way you're just more prepared for things. So it's just easy to incorporate. Also in this questionnaire, it is really nice to include other useful information, like the point of contact for the day. Like if the bride's not going to have their phone the whole time, then who else do you talk to? Is it the planner? Is it the mom? Is it the maid of honor? That kind of stuff, and like their phone number or whatever. And then any special moments that they want highlighted, like maybe she's wearing her grandmother's necklace and she wants to get lots of photos of that. So whether that's in detail photos or like of her wearing it, maybe grandma pinning it on if she's there, that kind of stuff. But just being aware of certain moments that they really, really want a focus on. So that way, you know, oh, this is a big moment. I gotta be there for that. And any tricky family dynamics that there might be, that's always good to know. So you just know ahead of time walking in that there might be some kind of sticky situation you might find yourself in. But on your couples questionnaire, you also ask them how best to support them if there is a tricky situation, so you'll feel prepared to help them through that moment too. So this way you're prepared with moments because they've already informed you. Something like anything with grandma is important. So you know to be watching grandma like a hawk throughout the wedding day, because if she's out there on the dance floor, if she's out there mingling with people, catch her reactions during the ceremony or the speeches or that kind of thing. Like highlight grandma like crazy, and you can be relaying that information to your team and just say, hey, they told me grandma's really important, so just be, try to remember to focus on her. Or if I'm out here doing something different, like make sure you go back and check on, what she's doing in the moment. And then you can get plenty of photos of her. And that was something that they made you aware of that you needed to be highlighting. So also, if there's any family dynamics that might be difficult to navigate, so that way you don't just show up and you're like, where's dad? And you're like, oh, we don't talk about dad. We don't talk about Bruno. Sorry, you're not here to listen to me sing, but that just made me think of it. Because there's been times where before I send out this questionnaire, or even I've been like second shooting with people who don't ask questions like that, and it just gets real awkward. It kind of brings the vibe down for the day, because they're like, oh, okay, well, he actually wasn't invited, or like, maybe they passed away or something like that. You just really don't want to be surfacing those feelings on what should be a really happy day, right? Their wedding day. So also on the wedding questionnaire is what's important to include is a list of family formals. I have talked about this so much, but getting a list of family formals is so important because you are able to make sure that you don't forget anybody, that they don't forget anybody, and you have a list you can call off names. And it's also kind of a default so that if, you know, some other random family member comes up and they want a picture with them, or they want a different grouping or something like that, you can be like, I'm sorry, like I have this list that we worked on before the wedding and we only allotted enough time to get all those photos done, so we can't add anything to it, we can't change it. And that way you're not hurting anybody's feelings. It's just like, oh, we just don't have time for it. And they're like, oh, okay. So you kind of have that as like a little scapegoat for you. But it's just important to tell them. I usually tell them parents, siblings, grandparents, like keep it really close, immediate family. Obviously, if like an aunt helped raise you or like was super important in your life, or a cousin or something like that is basically like your sister, then like you can include them. It's not like you can only have parents, siblings, and grandparents, but I tell them that usually is just the easiest way to keep the list a little smaller and to keep from hurting other people's feelings. So definitely get a family formals list from them. I even go so far as copying it from the questionnaire and putting it in the notes app on my phone, so that way I have it on my phone easily ready to go, whether I have service or not. Because I've been at reception venues sometimes where I can't pull up the family photo list because I don't have a reception. So screenshotting it or whatever, it works too, and then like marking it off on your phone, like drawing it on your phone. But I just have found that the notes app works best because you can create like the little check bubbles next to it, so you can literally check it off as you go along, like down the list. And if you share it with them, like collaborate with them, then they can be making adjustments like leading up to the wedding. Because, you know, I send this out about 3 months before the wedding. So as RSVPs are coming in, they're like, oh, you know, this person's not coming, or this person is coming, we're going to add them to the list because they're traveling from so far, that kind of stuff. And they can be editing it kind of as time goes. So the last thing that is really important to include on a pre-wedding checklist questionnaire, a pre-wedding questionnaire, is a vendor list with not just Instagram handles, but also email addresses. Because more than likely they've been communicating with them through email, so it's easy for them to just copy and paste that email address onto this questionnaire. But it's also nice to have the Instagram handles ready so that you can copy and paste them in a post that you're making for their wedding day afterwards. And you don't have to go digging for either of those informations, because you want the emails to be able to send the full gallery or the sneak peek gallery or whatever to them, and the Instagram handles to tag them. So it's just nice to have both and not have to dig, because sometimes there could be a pretty long vendor list. And so having to dig through all that stuff just to find all of those vendor information is just a lot of time on your end that you don't necessarily have to or want to do. Or sorry, you don't necessarily want to do or necessarily have time to be doing. The last thing I send, I guess not really the last things, there's technically two. A post-wedding questionnaire is how I kind of send off or seal off our experience together. So it is done after I send the full wedding gallery, because I ask them questions about, you know, how did you like your images and that kind of stuff. So it's great to send after the gallery, because then you can gather information from them in hindsight, like looking back on their wedding day, looking back on their images, that kind of stuff. This really helps when filling out information for blogs, because you can use that information to help, like whether it's advice or funny moments or something like that, or like really important moments from them that you want to touch on that you can include in their blog. It's also nice because you can make sure that your process is up to par, and you can see maybe areas where you need to improve. So throughout the whole wedding planning process, you can ask them questions about, you know, your communication method and timeliness of response. Obviously, like if they enjoyed their experience with you. I like asking about favorite memories of their day, like, you know, what was your favorite memory of the day, or if there was any mishaps on the day that they kind of look back at now and laugh. But you can even ask them for advice for future brides, and that's a great idea too, because you can say, hey, like, do you have any advice to give to future brides, or to your past self, like however you want to word it. But this is good because you can kind of compile that and include it in a welcome guide that you send them, or any like posts that you make, Instagram posts or reels that you can make about it. It's just always nice to be able to impart information onto future clients that other people besides yourself have said, because you can say it all the time, but if it comes from another bride, they're like, oh, I can relate to that, you know? So you can ask them lots of detailed questions about the process of working with you. Like I said, it just gives you a way to know like how you're doing, kind of checking in, not just you're checking in with yourself and with your business, and just making sure you're doing what you need to do and that you're keeping up to date with your clients and they're getting what they expected from you, or maybe they expected more and you didn't know it. It's just always nice to kind of get inside their brains in that aspect. And you can even leave a spot for them to leave like a review, whether that is private review that they just kind of give you feedback, whether it's hopefully not negative, but maybe something that they don't want to leave publicly, but something that they want to impart with you. And then you can also include a link for like a public review as well. Now that's really just for weddings because it's specific to weddings, but then there is a general feedback questionnaire that I send my clients after their sessions. And it's similar to the post-wedding questionnaire, but like I said, it's more generalized, so I can send it to everyone, whether it was a family session, a branding session, a maternity session. And it's again, just kind of collecting information that I want to incorporate into a blog about their session. I want to ask them how they felt, if they liked the images, but also information that's going to help me grow as a business owner, as a photographer, if there's anything that they would have liked to change or see. And then again, a spot to leave some private feedback and a link to leave a public review. Maybe you can ask for a few of their favorite images or share a favorite pose or prompt that you had them do, how you made them feel, etc., etc. Those things are all just really good because you can be like, oh, I didn't know people were loving that so much. Or like, oh, I didn't really know people were hating that so much. Because especially once you start doing this consistently, people will be answering them and you're like, oh, dang, okay, now I'm starting to see a trend here. Maybe I should change that, or like highlight that if it's a good thing. Like talk about it in your business, talk about it in your workflow, talk about it in your consultation calls with them, and just be like, this is what people say I'm really good at. It's just nice to know. So ways that you can send these questionnaires is through any kind of CRM. I think most of them nowadays have places for questionnaires. I use HoneyBook, which is literally, it helps me keep my head on straight. I could shout it from the rooftops. You've probably heard me talk about it a million times, but HoneyBook is amazing. It can keep track of all those things for you. And the best part about it is it will automate. You can have an automated system workflow set up so that you can have all these questionnaires be automatically sent to them at a specific time in the process. Because like, especially with a wedding, they can book you a year in advance. You don't want to have to remember to go back at okay, this one is in May, so 3 months before that I need to do this, and like, when are we doing their engagement photos? Okay, so then a month before that I need to send their couples questionnaire. So it's just really nice to be able to have that automated, and it will just automatically send those things for you, or at least send you a reminder. So it'll be like, hey, it's 3 months before this person's wedding, so send them their pre-wedding questionnaire. It's like, oh, dang, okay, cool. So it's just really nice to have that all kind of built into the same system. But if you are not ready to commit to HoneyBook, I do have a code that you can use. It's 50% off, which is amazing. And I definitely suggest that you try it. You're gonna change your life, bestie. But there are things like Google form that you can use to ask questions as well, and that's free and easy. And I think you can even customize it to include some like brand colors. I'm not sure about fonts, but it's just nice to have and really easy. Most people know how to use Google, so it's just a link and it's done, and it's really nice and easy. But those are some ways that you can send them questionnaires. You could also just create like a Word doc and just have them like send them the Word doc and have them edit it, like make a copy of it and edit it. But you want to make it as easy for the client as possible. So that's just why I like HoneyBook, because you have your contract in there, your invoice in there, your questionnaires are in there, all your emails you've sent between them are there. You can, any expenses you have, you can tie to that project. So if you buy a gift, or if you have to get gas to drive to their wedding, or pay for a hotel for their wedding, something like that, you can like see your expenses directly related to that specific session or wedding. Anyways, I'm getting off on a tangent now. This episode is not about HoneyBook, Kaylee. Okay, I could go on about it forever though. So that is ways that you can do questionnaires. I would just start by making them yourself and thinking about the kinds of questions, just like we did in the beginning where I had you get into your client's mindset. Think about what kinds of questions you'd want to be receiving and what other kinds of questions, like logistically, that you will need to just plan out the day, even like the session. Like, if it's a 2-hour session and there's multiple locations, like which one are you wanting to spend more time in, the dressy outfit or the casual outfit? Is there a location you want to spend more time at, or where you want to start, or whatever? And sometimes it's nice just to know they're ahead. They're like, oh, we want to end here because we're going to have dinner there afterwards, or something like that. But the other option is photographers like myself have questionnaires that you can purchase available in the shop. I have all of these, including the inquiry form, available on my shop. And it's just nice to have kind of a baseline that you can take and apply, and you can use these anywhere, whether it's HoneyBook or Google Forms, but you can kind of take that base that I've made for you and specific questions you might not have thought how to ask, or like you're not sure how to word it, and you can be like, oh, that sounds great, or like, oh, I never thought to ask that question, and you've got that already there as your baseline, and then you can add to it from there for things that you specifically need in your business, in your workflow. So check out my shop. I'll leave the link in the bio or in the description so that you can go check it out and easily get there and see all the things that you need to see. But just make sure when you're doing these questionnaires that you're on top of sending them, because sometimes if you're too late, or sometimes like after the session specifically, if you wait too long to send it, people will just kind of forget. Or they're like, that session happened like 6 months ago. Like, I'm not doing that questionnaire. I don't even remember how I felt that day. You never know. Maybe they will. So you can always try it and just see. But just have fun with them and know that whatever you do is not set in stone. You can always be tweaking them to suit your business needs best. And yeah, this was a quick episode, guys, but it was also hopefully a good one and very informative. And if you have any questions about questionnaires, you know my DMs are always open. I'm always ready to help you guys. So just pop in there, say hello. Let me know what you think about the podcast. If you guys are loving it, please, please, please leave a review, because it really helps me. Just like these questionnaires with my clients, I like to know what I'm doing well. I like to know what I need to improve on. And it also helps other people know that there's a podcast out there for them that they should be listening to, because their reviews are going to push it back up and suggest it to other people. So please, please, please leave a review, or just pop in the IG chats. I have a Instagram specifically for this podcast now called it's just clearly @clearlyfocusedpod. Pod. And you can share anything on there with your stories, tag me in it. I'm sharing some information on there as well that is not directly related to the podcast, so that's kind of fun. Just go give it a follow and stay updated on what's happening, and it'll be fun. Good times over there. So until next time, I will see you, and have a good rest of your week.